Green with another one of our focus on panels. We're one short today, so we're not quite sure where they are. But if they join us, then we'll just add them to the screen as and when they arrive. So the idea of these sessions is just to invite some experts in various fields to discuss a particular topic. You'll see going along the bottom of the screen. Our topic today is, do businesses do enough to protect themselves? So we're going to explore that and see where we go. We know not where, but the cunning plan is just to sort of like pick these guys' brains and sort of see what we could get from them. So without further ado, why don't you guys just introduce yourselves and let the audience know who you are. So Nikki.
So hi, I'm Nikki Buckley of East Midlands HR. We partner business with People Performance, and we're based in Ecton in Northamptonshire, so in between Northampton and Wellingborough. We do virtual and on-site support for SMEs on performance and strategy. That's our things we like to get involved to try and really help businesses make sure they're getting the best from their people management processes.
Okay, thank you very much. And Stephen.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for having me on. My name's Stephen Mather. I am a solicitor, business lawyer, and I help small and medium-sized businesses with their legal problems. I've been doing it for such a long time, over the last 15 years, both running a business, running businesses, and being a lawyer, that there's not really a problem that I've come across that I don't know how to sort and make go away, so that we all can all sleep better at night. That's my aim.
Perfect. And as people watching can see, I didn't get the red memo today, so not wearing red myself. So if you're listening to this live or you're listening to this on a replay, then please do pop some questions on whatever platform you're on, and we'll try and address those. So feel free to engage with us. So without further ado, then I'll come to you, Stephen, I think first. So obviously your expertise in the legal area of businesses. So do businesses protect themselves enough from a legal aspect, would you say?
So I think this, that to kind of summarize or headline, it's this: most small businesses try. They do try to cover all bases. And as a small business owner, we have, we're always spinning multiple plates, aren't we? We're the doer. We do things. We have to do the admin. We have to take the calls. We have to do the business development. We have to do the compliance. We have to do the legal. And we have to do the marketing and all of that. And as you get bigger, you might get some more support in. But the bottom line is, in a small business scenario, we're trying. Everyone tries to do, but there's always going to be gaps that people fall in between. My job and Nikki's job as professionals is to make sure that those people aren't falling in between those gaps, and that they do have the right things in place. So, Paul, as you might imagine, every time I've been on this panel, I've done some preparation and created a list of 10 things that I think small businesses should protect themselves more on. And the first point that I've got down actually is the structure in which the business is set up and ran. So there's a marked difference between someone being a sole trader and being a limited company. And what the phrase limited company means is it's limited liability, and your liability to creditors, people that the company owes, is limited to your investment in the company, which can be as little as £1. Now, practically, you might have invested your whole life and money into it, but it means that even if the company can't pay its debts, they can't come back to you as an individual and say, well, you owe me this money, because the dealings with the company. And so the first way, and really easy way of starting to protect yourself as a small business owner, is to incorporate and make sure that you have limited liability to the outside world. But it goes deeper than that, obviously. And then when you start trading, there's lots of things in a business's life cycle that people need to make sure that they're covering off in order to protect themselves. And the second one that I've got down is making sure that we're dealing with businesses or consumers with some good terms, conditions, or contracts in place. And they're really important, often overlooked, but really important ways of protecting yourself as a business. Less so if you're dealing with a consumer, because there's lots of consumer rights, but still really important to make sure that if you're dealing with the consumer, that you know what those rights are, what you can and can't do, and what the consumer can and can't do, and what notices you've got to give them, and what required information you've got to give them. but they come into their come into their own really when you're dealing with business to business contracts, and this is where you're talking about protecting yourself, because in a business to business contract you can pretty much write whatever you want, and the law says, well, like, go for it. And so if you want to say, go into this contract and say, I have no liability whatsoever for, if something goes wrong, and if that's what's agreed between the parties, then that's it. It means they can't sue you. So, if you go in and I'm not allowed to do this because I'm a regulated individual, but if a business goes in and completely messes up and they don't have a contract, completely messes up, delays delivery of the goods or the services, causes lots of issues, then the customer could, in theory, turn around and sue them, bring a claim, not just for the amounts that they've paid, but the amounts that they've lost, the loss of profit, the loss of goodwill, the loss of reputation, and all of these things that lawyers call consequential losses, things that go beyond just the initial amount and they go much more. And it could be a lot of money. And there's no insurance in place for that or anything like that. So having some terms and conditions or a contract in place would allow you as a supplier to say, do you know what, actually I'm going to limit my liability to, for instance, the amount of the invoice. So that all I ever have to do is, if things go wrong, is refund you the amount of the invoice and then I'm off. Yeah, no more liability.
Yeah, it sounds simple when you say it, doesn't it? But I guess there's a lot of people that just don't have the basics in place. What about you, Nikki, from an HR perspective? What do you see in terms of the lack, or maybe not the lack, of businesses protecting themselves from an HR perspective?
Well, Steve and I completely agree. Businesses do try. They try to get the right documents in place, and they think that sometimes you'll download a document and it'll have this option or this option, and they'll pick the one that they think is right, but might not be right for their employment. And that's where they just really got to be careful about, if they're putting a contract together, do they really understand what the actual sections are and what's going to be in there, what's not, what policies need to go in place. So whether it's a disciplinary policy, appeal process, the same with the grievance policy as well. And again, if they're a small business, they'll need to think about, well, actually, if there's only me, the employees, who's going to do any appeal meeting if I'm the employee? Well, actually, yes, you can do both, but you just have to word it your policy around to reflect that. It's not ideal, and I ultimately, you really want to get somebody else involved to do a separate appeal hearing if you wanted to. So, but as long as there's a process there that can be followed, that's really, really good. Health and safety as well. And while I'm not a health and safety expert, I've had a lot of involvement with health and safety. And I think that's where sometimes businesses don't get involved, because they might not have the 5 employees that they need to start ticking the boxes to start getting health and safety involved as well. But also then you've got your regulations. I'm presuming, and I shouldn't presume, I know most businesses will know about national minimum wage and things like that. They're thinking about working time directive. We've got 2 jobs, which might be quite key at the moment, with people maybe deciding, do you know what, I'm going to go and get a second job to top up my money, especially in these financial constraints that they may have. Like myself would be able to support these businesses that maybe haven't got a second job clause in the contracts.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. So, Stephen, what's number 3 on your list then?
Well, actually, just touching on that, one thing that clients have said to me over the years, and it's usually particularly employment law. I don't know what it is, but there's a certain type of business owner and manager that has a sort of a disregard or a dislike of all these European employment laws coming over, right? And that what they tend to say to me is, it's a minefield, right? Oh, it's a minefield. I.e., you can't do right for doing wrong, or whichever way around that phrase is, because something's going to go wrong. I'm trying my best and something's going to go wrong. And my answer to that is, it may be a minefield, but you can navigate a minefield if you have a map of where all the mines are. Yeah. And yeah, it's really simple, straightforward, isn't it? And you do that by making sure that in employment law, for instance, that your documentation is right. Because what the law says is that the only time that you have an issue is if you sack somebody unfairly, or it's motivated by some discrimination. Okay, and unfairness comes down to 2 things: one, following a procedure, or two, making a decision that no one in their right mind would make. Okay. And so, look, I can't help you making a decision that no one in their right mind would make. If you're a lunatic and you want to sack somebody, go for it. But we can help you make sure that you're following a process. So having all of those policies and procedures in place is all just about saying, here's the process that I'm going to follow. I know that somebody has written them for me, and if I follow them to the T, I'm pretty much going to be okay. The next one on my list is as the business starts to develop is things like to protect the business outputs. Are things like protecting, registering trademarks and other what's called IP, intellectual property, things like design rights and patents. Now they're a little bit more advanced for a business, depends on where it is in its life cycle, than just a startup. But if you've got invested money into a really cool, funky logo or brand, slogan, then it's worthwhile protecting that by way of registering it as a trademark to ensure that no one else can use it against you. If you've come up with a really good, interesting design of a product, then it's a good idea to protect it to make sure no one else can copy that design. Or if you've come up with an invention that no one else has come up with before, then it's next level stuff, and registering a patent again gives you protection that no one else can come in and copy those things. And so those things are, appreciate, not something that maybe small businesses have in mind. They might have in the sort of a trademark side of things, but definitely worthwhile businesses contemplating and thinking about to make sure they're protecting, because there's a lot of time and money and effort that goes into the R&D of developing a new product or design or whatever it is, and it's reasonably cheap to then protect it to make sure no one else can copy it.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, because I went through the process of trademarking my logo when we rebranded a couple of years ago, and it's a fairly straightforward process. That there's time involved, but you can pretty much do it online. I think it was around £300, something like that sort of level. Which is a chunk of money, but the process is relatively straightforward, and you do get some people can contest whether the logo can go through. The trademark people, that's probably not what they're called. They'll look and sort of see if there's anything similar that exists, and they'll raise that to anybody else that's got a registered trademark for them to object. So yes, it's worth doing. I think if you're proud of your brand and you want to have some protection so someone can't come along and just rip you off, then it's worth that process, I think.
Yeah.
What's number 4 then, Stephen?
Where am I? Things like in terms of protection, so things that are really important, the fundamentals, getting a will in place. So although that sounds like it's something that relates to your personal life, the business is an asset that gets either inherited by your estate or not, according to what your will says. If you die without a will, if you've got a company, your shares in the company will be inherited by whoever the law says. And that could be someone that you don't want to inherit your shares. And all of a sudden, particularly in a company that has more than one shareholder, you have a situation where someone dies and there's another person still going and running the company. Someone dies, their shares get inherited by, could be their spouse, their partner, but it could be, in theory, their sons and daughters, or their uncles and aunties, nieces and nephews. And the surviving shareholder might not like them, might not get on with them. And what usually happens is that person actually doesn't want to do any work because they've already got a job. They're already doing something else. And so you have then an issue with things. So there's a number of points all wrapped up in one, really, which is looking at, if you do have a limited company, getting a shareholders agreement in place. That's a contract that governs the relationship between shareholders. Linking that to potentially some life insurance, if the shares are going to be worth something, and then having things like a will in place so that you can direct what happens to those shares. Now, what usually happens is that if you've got a company that is trading, what you'd usually want to see is the shares being purchased by the other shareholder so that they can carry on running the business and everyone's happy. And then the deceased estate then will just get cash, a payment in terms of those shares. But it can be it can be a variety of different options available. But it's about planning and working that through, because you just have to trust me on this. Not doing it is a whole like whole world of pain, and it's expensive, and it's painful, and it's time consuming, and it goes on forever. And it means that the company, which is usually, that's where the money's made, that's what's creating a lifestyle of the family, that's where everything is, can't really do much because you didn't put the things in place that you needed to put in place. And again, these things are all really simple. It's not really difficult to do and sit down with somebody and get them in place, but it's a really, really easy and almost, I would say, necessary way to protect yourself, protect the business, and protect the future generations.
Mm, mm. Would you include sort of lasting power of attorney in that as well? Because I've heard nightmare stories of where people don't have that in place and they become incapacitated in some way, and the business almost stops overnight because the person can't sign the checks anymore.
Absolutely, I would, and I would even give it its own numbering in my system. It's that important.
Wow, I've got a separate entry. Sorry for stealing your thunder, Steve.
No, it's fine. Look, so for those that people may have heard of a power of attorney, everyone's heard of a will. They kind of understand what a will does. A power of attorney is a different thing. It's a different document. There's two types of a power of attorney. So one is about health. And so it's about decisions about what medical treatment you do, you undergo, and that kind of thing. And the other one is about finances, what happens to your money. And appointing an attorney means appointing somebody that makes decisions for you when you're not able to make decisions. Now, typically, people can generally understand that comes into play when you lose mental capacity, that you're not mentally capable of making decisions. Because you've got, Alzheimer's, dementia, or whatever, and you can't make decisions. There's someone else stands in your shoes and makes those decisions for you. Okay, do we want him to have this, this treatment? Do we want him to go on, under resuscitation if he needs to, etc., etc. And for finances, here's some money. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to invest it to make sure that he can carry on living? Are we going to pay the care homes and that kind of thing? But from a business scenario, while that's important, actually, for me, what's more important, and the bigger reason to have a power of attorney in a business, is because sometimes you're not physically able to do things. Mm-hmm. So mentally, you might be absolutely sound as a pound and be able to make all the decisions that you want, but you're involved in a horrific car accident and you lose your limbs and you're not able to sign documents. If you're not able to sign documents, there's a lot of things in law that you cannot do, because signing is still the way in which you approve things. And so you would, if you have the benefit of a power of attorney, you can then say, hey, look, I'm making the decision, but this person is going to be signing for me, and they sign the document and everything goes through nice and smoothly. So that means you can change the bank mandate because you're no longer able to do it, or you're able to sell your shares, or you're able to buy or sell property. Things like that all require an actual signed piece of paper on a signed document on a piece of paper. You can do all of that if you have a power of attorney. If you don't, and you're not able to make those decisions or physically sign the paper, then what happens is you need to go to court and get a court order to say that somebody can act as your attorney. And that process is about 4 or 5 times the cost of doing it up front. And it takes about 9 to 12 months to get the court order. It's not a quick process. Yeah. And in the meantime, you've got a business that all of a sudden has stopped because it cannot do anything.
And again, am I right in thinking that people can do this themselves? They can go online. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you can go online. You can do a power of attorney yourself. Costs 80 quid per attorney per type. So health and wealth. 80 quid each. And that powers of attorney, like trademarks, definitely some, you can do it. So I do offer the service, but you can do it yourself. It's reasonably straightforward. Powers of attorney are a little bit more complicated. The documents are probably about 20 pages long. And crucially, if you get any aspect of it wrong, then it's all defective, and it means you kind of back to square one. So the same as everything else with like employment stuff, probably best to get an expert to do it unless you're really hard up on money, and then do it yourself. But just know that kind of you can make mistakes and kibosh it all.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nikki, back to the HR world then. What would you say are the basics that the business should have in place to make sure they're protected from an employee point of view?
Well, this might link nicely into the signature, so making sure that things are signed. So if you are issuing them out, there's looking at the platforms that you use. So there's lots of e-sign, and again, as things went remote and hybrid, it's been a really good tool for getting contracts out, but making sure that you've got the right backup data. But looking at HR systems as well, there's lots of systems out there. Use the ones that will tick to see if people have actually read the document, so that actually there's none of this. Have you read that? Have you done this? I've got this. Can I file it? You know, this conversation as they go, well, where's the bit of paper? Well, I've lost that. Actually, you've got it all in front of you on a track with a box saying, yes, this was read by such a person, the employee on such a date. But it's a great way to make sure that if you're put out or reminders of policies and procedures, it's a great tool to use to get that message across, so that you can make sure that it has been read and understood. But also, again, with induction, making sure all that's all sorted. So for me, the main things would be contracts of employment, making sure that's all signed. Although if it's not signed, essentially, it could be taken that it could be agreed in principle, as they are carrying on working with carried on working without signing the contract. But yes, I would always like a signed contract. Going back a step further, I'd probably say your right to work is probably the key thing. That is the thing I think that most could raise a lot of scare issues for small businesses, that they've not done the correct process and that they've not signed it, or they've not recorded the date where they've seen the original documents, or they're not using the correct settled status documents. That's actually, I find them quite easy to use, and we're hoping in October that the UK and Irish passports will go down the same route as well, so that everything will be online, so it's easier to check, making it really easy to do those right to work checks. And then the key policies that need signing off, yeah, all those need to be in place.
And do you find that even if some businesses sort of have these fundamental things in place, that they've sort of done it once, haven't reviewed them, haven't changed it for any legislation that changes, so you know they're stuck with the old documentation, which I guess won't protect them from that point of view if it's not current?
Yeah, and it's just that protection from there is claims that people can put in through tribunal for bits being not right in the contract. So get the contracts right. They did change in April 2020. A number of key changes were in there. So if you've not looked at your contracts since then, they're probably out of date. Even just going from stipulating the hours of work and the days people are going to work, that's the main thing that people do miss out. And any other benefits, that's the other thing that people miss out, is they don't just list benefits or training issues that you may provide. Even if it's to say there's no other training, that really should be in your contract of employment.
Hit us with another top tip then, Stephen.
Well, almost kind of linked to that, ways in which, so most businesses will be aware that there's some mandatory insurances that they need to take out. So employer liability is one of them, public liability is another one, and then mandatory for every business to take out if you've got public or employees or public premises, and that covers, if someone has an accident, injury at your location, you've got insurance cover. But actually beyond that, there's lots of different insurances that organizations can take out that is a really simple, easy way of protecting the business and protecting yourself. So, if you're providing services, for instance, you can get some professional indemnity insurance to cover, if you make a mistake, and sometimes you do. Sometimes you don't know everything, and you say something, and it turns out to be, incorrect, or it wasn't up to date, or whatever, and you've got some insurance to cover, the cost of rectifying it or going wrong. Or if you're, even on site, you can have insurance to cover, workmanship issues and things like that. And again, it's the relatively low cost to way of protecting the business and protecting yourself. So that is that I've got down, and kind of linked back to the shareholders type of thing that I was talking about, is things like life insurance, but the wider than that is pensions, investments, and sitting down with a financial advisor and working through that. Again, I know that that's it's personal, sorry. It's a personal thing, but it's also the businesses involved. And while I am not a financial advisor, and this is definitely not financial advice because I'm not allowed to give it, most business owners can maximize or minimize their tax liability by maximizing their way in which they're carrying out investments, pensions investments, for instance. So most business owners will be able to make payments into their pension without paying or reducing down their liability to income tax. And so not only are you protecting yourself from the taxman and how much you have to pay them, but you're also protecting yourself for future plans, retirement, and that kind of thing. And again, I know it's something that in a small business, money counts, and it's really important. Cash flow is always really important. But I would strongly recommend sitting down with a financial advisor and looking at what can be done, even if it's early doors. Here's an interesting. This is slightly off topic, but this is an interesting. What do they call it? Interesting thing. I've lost all words. An interesting thing, which said this: if by the age of 25 you've invested £25,000 in an account, stocks and shares, and didn't put any more money in it until you were 65 and you retired, assuming that it increased at 10% a year, you end up with £1.1 million at the end of come to retirement. And then if you do the same sums when you're 35, you end up with 400 grand. And it goes down, obviously, the lower, the less time that you're investing. So, financial advisors will always say, do it sooner rather than later. And for business people, just get a financial advisor and have a chat with them and start putting some money away if you're not already doing it.
Absolutely, yeah. The earlier start, the better, I guess, with a lot of those things, isn't it? Life is short. So the younger you can start it, the cheaper it's going to be, etc.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Hit us with another tip then, Stephen.
Well, this one was for Gail, but she didn't turn up. So if you're listening, Gail, now's the time to join us. GDPR and data protection. GDPR, data protection was when was this? 5 years ago, was it? That there was a hullabaloo about it, and everyone was going mad, and people were going on courses about it and coming back and saying, we can't do anything. All right, one of my staff at the time said, we've got to get rid of bins from the office. We can't have bins anymore, just in case something goes in. GDPR. And so what a lot of businesses at the time did is they might have got somebody in to write a policy about it, right? But that isn't what GDPR is about. Right? GDPR is actually just about safeguarding customers, individual customers, private personal information, and making sure that you've got systems in place to ensure that information doesn't go out into the wider public. You might get hacked. That would be a data breach, right? And so again, it's about protecting your business, because there's massive fines if you get it wrong. But it's not just enough to just have a policy in place. I'm finding lots of businesses, when we come to sell, they kind of go, when it gets to the question about GDPR, they go, yeah, we've done that. Okay, what have you done? Well, here's the policy. No one's seen it. No one's looked at it. They don't send it to anybody, and they don't comply with their own terms. And I say, well, did you have anybody come in and have a look at the systems, the audit the computer systems and this, that, and the other? And the answer is typically no. And so it does require experts like DataSense that can come in and do an audit, because they look at it from what the legislation looks like. Yeah, it's from the regulatory compliance side of things, but also what your computer and IT systems are doing, because that's typically where the data is stored these days. Obviously, if you've got paper files, I had one issue, when was that, a couple of years ago, where the problem was, no, everything's safe and sound. I take the files and put them in my car boot every night, and that's locked overnight on my driveway. That doesn't sound like the safest way to store all this data. There might be a better way of doing this. So that one would be, GDPR isn't just about having a policy. It's about having someone come in, look at what the systems are, seeing how you can do it. Very simple level of like having antivirus software on there, which most people are going to do, but also things like If you've got laptops, this is getting too technical for me almost, but having laptops, you need to make sure that you're up to date on the latest Windows, that you've got like what they call BitLocker encryption on there, so that if it gets nicked, that no one can take the hard drive out and still steal the data, and making sure you know your data and software is all compliant and all that kind of thing. So much more than I know about. And I'm, annoyed really that that Gail couldn't fill us in with actual expert advice at that point.
You blagged it quite well, Stephen. You did all right. I think the fundamental thing there is, pretty much every business will be handling data in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's just like an email database or something like that, even your Outlook or whatever you're using. And I think, on that basis, then every business should be registered with the ICO. Information Commission Officer, is it? And again, it's not an expensive thing. You can do it online. I think it's about £35, £35 or something like that. And they'll take you through the process in order to establish, what level of data management you are undertaking, and therefore, give you the right guidance. And then that just sort of like is a first step, not the be all and end all, but at least you're being conscious of registering yourself as a data user. So Stephen touched on sort of like the consequences in terms of fines. What in terms of your world, Nikki, what are some of the consequences for businesses not having their HR ducks in a row?
So the right to work, there's potentially a £20,000 fine for not having the satisfactory response or excuse for having the correct copies of documents and things like that. And again, there'll be some where there's some changes that went over, as you were aware, from April, and things going online with the settlement scheme and all those things. There'll be various things that you've had pre-expiry dates on. What I find is if people are relying on a spreadsheet, or maybe they have got a basic HR system, as long as they've got that data on there with reminders on to say, well, actually, this is now expired, and they're doing it 6 months before, because it can take that long to request and get more copies from an up-to-date one, then that's what they need to be making sure. There's obviously, yes, the tribunal claims for unfair dismissal, should you need to terminate employments and things like that. But I think the main ones for me is looking at eliminating the risk of getting to that tribunal, because think about all the costs to get there. You've got to put all your bundle together and all your paperwork and all the things that sort of culminate in that, and then it's normally about 2 years away, because I think the waiting list is still that long, and it's keeping in touch with people, making sure that the managers are then trained at how they go through the process, and going through their statement and making sure everything clear, proactive about it, and get the processes in place. You have to put yourself through that pain.
And that's it. And it's the time issue that most people don't, they completely overlook. And so something like that, it's detracting you from running the business and earning the money. And for most business owners, they earn much more money running the business or doing the things that makes them money than dealing with, HR person or a lawyer, or doing it themselves and dealing with a tribunal claim or any of those kind of issues, really, that we've talked about. It detracts from running the business and earning the money.
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in a couple of tribunal cases in my career, and they are, as you said, Nikki, very time consuming, because you have to collate all the evidence, you have to go back to, whatever the issues were, and look at emails and et cetera. And I think both of these cases were, sort of almost settled on the courtroom steps, which almost felt like a waste of time, all the work you did, because you didn't have to, in the end, put your case forward. But, in both cases, it resulted in poor processes, or not following a process, or not having a process. And that's really all it is about. And, had we, at the time, with both these organisations that I work with, had the right things in place and got the right advice at the time, it wouldn't have even got that far. Just silly little things, just that people could raise a case over. Anything else on your list, Stephen?
No, not in particular, but the summary of it all is the question is, do businesses protect themselves enough? And the best way of protecting yourself is to know what you know and know what you don't know. And if you don't know it, get somebody else on board to help you with it.
Yeah.
And that becomes, what tends to happen is for cost reasons or whatever, people fudge it. And they whatever it is that they're doing, they try and fudge it. They try and go, well, I'll manage that. I'll do this and do that. And that isn't protecting yourself. That's leaving you wide open for attack on whatever ground it is that we've looked at. Kind of DIY is always, you're open for attack. So the overriding tip would be just get advice if you don't know what you're doing.
Okay. Nikki, you have any last comments before?
Yeah, no, it's very similar to Stephen, is take advice. There's lots of resources on there, and by all means do your research and get up to date as much as you can, but have a call. A lot of places will give you free initial consultation, free in the first instance, so that you can have that conversation to see actually what advice am I going to need in the future. You might be a micro business, then looking to take on new employees, and as the business grows, what are the challenges that your line managers may have? So it's thinking about actually where do I want to go in the future, and what support am I going to business grows or continues to develop.
Yeah, I guess in both your domains, unfortunately, a lot of small businesses, in my experience, leave it till the solids have hit the air conditioning, and then it's going to be much more expensive for them because it's more time and etc. etc. So I guess it's requesting that businesses look ahead a little bit more and be more strategic about putting the foundations in place, so they don't have to, so they can feel more comfortable rather than something catching them out around the corner. Well, thank you very much.
Paul, I've just sorry to interrupt. I've just added another thing on my list, if it's okay. It just came to me.
You, Stephen, and you're a nice chap. Go ahead.
So when we talk about the question is, do businesses do enough to protect themselves? And for most small businesses, as we know, it's the business owner or the director. They're the driver of the business. And so it just occurred to me that actually looking after yourself has got to be a real priority. And I realized the irony of me forgetting to mention that and making it a priority shows and demonstrates where we're at still as a nation, as a philosophy. But mental health and well-being has got to be a priority for all small business owners, because we go through a lot. We have to deal with all of this nonsense we just talked about. Yeah, we have to deal with somebody doing an employment tribunal claim, or a customer complaining, or a supplier not delivering, or somebody not paying, and we have all of these things. And I actually think, and I know you didn't pay me to do this, but having something like the business community, where there is a genuine community around small business owners, where you can talk about some issues and some problems, and being able to do that is one step on the mental health, well-being ladder. Talking about the issues, talking about the problems is always going to help. Being able to make time for yourself, doing whatever it is you enjoy, going for a walk, or cooking, or singing badly, or whatever it might be. All of those things are to help people's mental health, and it is actually really, really important. And I'm kicking myself now that I didn't make it number one, because it is a priority.
Funny enough, I'm glad you said that, because it's a nice segue into the next focus on panel that we're going to be doing, because we're going to be looking at the importance of personal development for small business owners. And I'm sure the topic of, mental and health well-being will definitely come up. So a nice little segue there, Stephen. So thanks again, guys. So these are broadcast live streamed every Tuesday at 11 a.m. unless there's 5 Tuesdays in a month, in which case we miss the 5th Tuesday. And as I said, next time we'll have another group of experts just talking about personal development for small business. So thank you again.